I've lived in the Balkans my whole life, and there's something I've noticed that I've never really heard people talk about. It feels like standing out is almost frowned upon, not in some extreme way where people are going to stop talking to you or anything like that. It's more subtle. If you wear something different, people notice. If you get a different haircut, people notice. You start a hobby that isn't very common, people notice. It feels like there's this unspoken pressure to fit in. Now, obviously, I'm not saying this only happens in the Balkans. I'm sure people in other countries experience the same thing, but growing up here, it's definitely something I've noticed. And I honestly think that's one of the reasons why so many people end up looking, dressing, and acting almost exactly the same. I don't even think most people realize they're doing it. When you're younger, fitting in just becomes normal. Don't really question it. If everyone in your friend group dresses a certain way, chances are you'll start dressing that way too. If everyone gets the same haircut, you'll probably end up getting the same haircut. Nobody forces you. Nobody tells you what you have to do. You just don't want to be the one person who stands out. And after years of doing that, it becomes automatic. You stop asking yourself what you actually like. Instead, you start asking yourself what everybody else is wearing. I think one of the biggest reasons people don't try new things is because everybody has something to say. If you wear a different jacket, somebody comments on it. If you grow your hair out, someone comments on it. If you shave your head, someone comments on it. You start dressing differently, someone immediately asks what's going on. Most of the time, people are just joking around, I know that, but when you're hearing those little comments all the time, eventually you stop wanting to stand out. You start choosing the safer option instead, not because it's what you wanted, but because it's easier. One thing that's always stood out to me is how repetitive men's fashion has become, especially with teenagers. I believe every couple of years, everyone just decides to wear the exact same thing. A few years ago, it felt like everybody had Nike Air Max shoes. Then it was tech fleeces everywhere. Now everywhere look it's Karl Lagerfeld t-shirts, shoes, slim or skinny jeans. And that's what everyone wears now, at least in my town. And then in a year or two, it will probably be something completely different. People don't seem to develop their own style anymore. They just move up from one trend to the next. One brand becomes popular, everyone buys it. And then another brand takes over. And suddenly everyone's wearing that instead. I'm not saying these clothes look terrible. If you genuinely like them, wear them. But sometimes it feels like people aren't wearing them because they actually love them. They're wearing them because that's what everybody else is wearing. You can walk through the city and see 10 different friend groups, but it almost looks like they all show up at the same place. I just wish people experimented a bit more. Maybe try different styles, different colors, different fits. At least then it feels like you're dressing for yourself instead of dressing for everybody else. I think this mindset starts really early. When you're in school, fitting in feels like one of the most important things ever. Nobody wants to be known as the weird kid. Nobody wants to be the person everyone laughs at. So people naturally copy what's around them. For example, one guy buys a certain pair of shoes, a month later, half the class has them. Somebody gets a haircut that's popular, now everybody wants that haircut. It's not even something people think about, it just kind of happens. And after years of doing that, following everyone else just becomes normal. One thing I've always found strange is how interested some people are in other people's lives. Again, I'm not saying everyone's like this. I've met plenty of people who genuinely couldn't care less. But if you've grown up in certain towns, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Some people always seem to know what's going on with everybody else. Who bought that, who broke up with who got a new haircut, who started dressing differently, who got a tattoo. It feels like people pay way more attention to everybody else's business than their own. And if you're someone who likes doing things differently, you'll probably hear about it. Maybe some people make jokes, maybe they gossip, maybe they call you weird, maybe they start giving you nicknames. Most of the time it's not because you're actually done anything wrong, you just don't fit into what they're used to seeing. I think that's one of the reasons so many people choose to blend in. It's not always because they want to, sometimes it's because they're tired of constantly being judged for every little thing. And honestly, I think that's a shame. I also think part of it comes from the way a lot of us were raised. Growing up, it almost felt like there was this expectation that guys weren't supposed to care too much about how they look. If you spend too much time picking an outfit, people would make comments. If you started taking better care of your appearance, people would ask why. If you wanted to experiment with fashion instead of wearing what every other guy was wearing, some people would immediately call it weird. Again, I'm not saying everyone thinks like this. I've met plenty of people who don't care at all, but I do think that attitude still exists in a lot of places. It's almost like the expectation is that men should keep it simple, not stand out, and definitely not care too much about fashion. And I think that's one of the reasons so many guys never really experiment with their style. But because they know the second they do, someone's going to have an opinion about it. Personally, I don't really see the problem. If someone enjoys fashion or wants to put more effort in how they look, why should anyone else care? At the end of the day, it's their clothes, their money, and their choice. And I think that's the part that kind of sucks. Not because everybody has to dress differently, not because everybody has to stand out, but because a lot of people never really discover what they actually like. They never experiment, they never try something different because they're worried about getting judged. And if everybody keeps thinking like that, nothing changes. Everybody just keeps copying everybody else. I honestly think fashion should be something that's personal, something that shows a little bit of who you are, not just whatever happens to be trending this year. I will say though, I think things are slowly getting better. You definitely see more people experimenting now than you did years ago. You see people trying different aesthetics, different hairstyles, different hobbies. More people are becoming comfortable about expressing themselves. And honestly, I hope that keeps happening, because life would be pretty boring if everybody looked exactly the same. You don't have to just like everybody else to fit in, and you shouldn't feel like you have to hide who you are just to avoid a few comments. So I guess the point I'm trying to make isn't that everybody should force themselves to be different. If you genuinely like what's popular, that's completely fine. Just make sure it's actually because you like it, not because you're worried about what everybody else is going to think. People are always going to have an opinion, no matter what you wear, no matter what haircut you have, no matter what hobby you pick up. You can't control that. What you can control is whether you let those opinions decide who you are. Because at the end of the day, you're the one living your life, not the people making comments from the sidelines. I guess that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.